Today I wanted to go through the steps on how to capture an ILS from a GPS flight plan in the Garmin G1000. I'm going to be flying this Cessna 182 Skylane, which is made by Carenado, but it has the G1000 glass cockpit in there, so it'll work the same as if you're flying the 172 or the Caravan 208 or any other aircraft that has the G1000 in there. The steps are going to be the same. So let's go ahead and jump on over to the world map. And we're going to be doing a very short flight of taking off from Oakland County International in Michigan. And we're just going to do a very short flight over to Livingston County. And we're going to set that as our arrival. So I imagine that's what most people do, is they just select their departure starting from the runway and finishing at an airport, and then they have a direct GPS flight plan, although it is VFR. Now we are going to be doing an IFR because I want to involve ATC with this, because it can give you some different options when you're flying on the type of approach that you are going to be choosing. So we're going to go ahead and drop down and do low altitude airways, which is underneath IFR. IFR stands for instrument flight rules, where VFR stands for visual flight rules. So IFR means that you really need to be in touch with ATC at all times, whether it's a departure controller, arrival, or just a controller in general. You need to be in touch with them and squawking a specific code, so that way they can identify you on the radar and make any adjustments as needed to your sort of flight plan. So let's go ahead and select low altitude airways. And you notice nothing changed. And the reason why is because this is only 25 nautical miles. For example, if we were to go, let's say we wanted to go over to Grand Rapids, we make this our new arrival. You can see it did all sorts of stuff in there. It also selected a departure, which really, if you just went direct, we're not going to get into the departures and arrivals, but you can see this now made a flight plan on how to get there. So like if you're flying an airliner, that's what you would want to do, because you have a lot more space and time in order to do it, versus just a direct route would, in that distance you could do it in a small sort of like turboprop or something, but otherwise, that's a very short flight, and you would have these waypoints. But as I said, we are not going to be doing that today. We are going to be going to Livingston, and we just have a direct route there using IFR Airways. Now, that does give us the approach option. Now, if you select that, you can see, oh great, we do have an ILS 1.3. So let's select that, because that's what we want. Now, listen, it does this, which is a little weird for where we're coming from. So it's having us go, pretty much southwest to hit. Right here is actually a VOR. It's not showing up because I don't have that filter on. Called Salem, and then it's going all the way up to the airport, but over the airport to come out to the initial fix, turn around, and then come into land, which makes no sense whatsoever. So what do we need to do in order to make this flight plan make sense? Well, obviously we don't want that. So let's go back to automatic. That's just selected our straight direct route. And if we go ahead and come over to actually look at an ILS chart, we can have a couple of different options for once we get into the G1000. Now I use Sky Vector, which I have open. And you can see we have Livingston County here. Here's Pontiac here. And you can make a flight plan in here if you wanted to. But really all we want to do is look at the ILS chart. So if you right click on the airport and then hover over it, you can see ILS for runway 13. Now if you click on the little PDF icon, it'll open up in a new tab. And this is called an ILS plate. There's a couple of things that we want to take note of when we're here. Number one being the frequency. Think of an ILS as being a transmitter at the actual airport, and it needs a frequency in your navigational equipment tuned in order to pick up the guidance that you want. So one of those things that you need to know is the course that you need to fly in on, which in this case it is 132. The runway is 13, which would be 130, but there's always a little deviation. So this is a course of 132. And then we also want to have a look at the vertical guidance here, which is known as a glide path or glide slope. And you can see there's different waypoints on there. Now, if you look, that Salem one that the world map was choosing, which is down here, shows it going out, turning around, and coming back down and coming into land. We also have one up in Flint, which is a Vortac, and that would be coming in, hitting Hucky, and then same sort of thing, coming in onto the ILS. Now, we could do Flint, but that's taken us pretty far out of the way at 23 nautical miles. That's what this number is underneath those, is how many miles you are away from your next fix. So that's, we're only doing 25 nautical miles in a direct route, so we don't want to go all the way up and then add pretty much what we were doing already. So we do have this Hucky. Now, Hucky is what we call an IAF, or what that stands for is your initial approach fix. Now, it doesn't say on here, but Durgi is your FAF, which is your final approach fix, which you can see also is where they have this little sort of like cross, which is where you'd want to make sure you pick up the glide slope coming in. We're going to pick it up sooner than that. So really, Hucky is what makes the most sense for us, because we're coming from over here directly over, well, we're coming directly over right now to the airport. But from Hucky, we're only looking at, less than, let's see, 11 miles here. So you've got, there all adds up. There's a little bit of a tricky thing here because we're coming at a funny angle that we do this sort of like teardrop to join this, so that way we don't have to make this crazy sharp turn. So we do have a little bit of a teardrop, which we'll see in the G1000 as well. So really what you need to know is your frequency, your course, and your transition. So on this case, transitions are Salem, Flint, and Hucky. Let's go ahead and jump back over to the flight simulator. And we're just going to leave this as really as a direct on all fronts. We are going to use ATC. So we want to set our altitude. Typically, the way I'll do this to make it have the best chance of success, because a lot of times they don't work out very well, is go to higher than the lowest waypoint. So on here you can see we have 3,200 feet. So if we go up to 4,000, and then we can see everything is updated to 4,000. Obviously, if you have terrain or obstacles in the way, you want to go quite a bit above those, because otherwise ATC will assign you a different altitude and can get a little frustrating. So just make sure you've got your altitude set to something that makes sense. From there, we can just go ahead and click fly. So you can see ATC is already talking while you're getting ready to taxi out. Hopefully they're going to make them hold. Yeah. So they gave us clearance, but they gave us information before that. We're just going to click ready to fly. I want to see if we can get a little bit more lights going on here. Nope, that's it. We're going to adjust the time of day here real quick. So if we look back through our ATC, we just want to make sure that they did give us that climb and maintain our altitude there, which they did. So that is great. So we're going to come over and get our autopilot set up. We're going to rotate over to 4,000 feet, which is showing up there. And then as far as our initial sort of flight out, really we've got to turn around. So we're going to do that by heading mode. You can either rotate this to be at the runway heading, or you can just click on it and it will line up. So like there, it just lined right up to our current heading. The other thing you want to make sure is that your barometric pressure is correct. So you can either dial that in with this one here, or shortcut key on a keyboard is the letter B, and that will just set it correctly. So other than that, we are pretty much good to go as far as our altitude and heading mode. We just want to make sure that all our switches are on, which we're good. Everything's all set there. And we can go ahead. I'm just going to give my controls a little wiggle here. There we go. All right, let's pop that parking brake off. Oh, Mr. Airliner is gone. Yep. All right. Anyways, we're going to go ahead and slowly advance that throttle. Get rolling. And then this 182 rotation is right around 55, 60 knots. We have 1 notch of flaps in. There we go. We can go ahead and start rotating. Nice smooth takeoff there. Just going to climb out just for a little bit here. We're already clear of obstacles, so I'm going to go ahead and raise our flaps. And really at this point, I can engage the autopilot. So if you're using the 172, your autopilot will be here, and this aircraft is down here. We can enable that, and then we can just arm our altitude, and then we get our vertical speed settings down here. So we can tune that. Now we did just get an assignment to change over to reach our departure, so we can acknowledge that. And then we can also start our heading turn. So we hit heading, and we can rotate around while we tune over. So, you know, a little bit of quickness going on there, but really this is just an easy way to fly in. And they're just going to acknowledge that they picked us up and continue as planned. So we're good to go there. You don't even need to acknowledge that, because really you just need to have that two-way communication. As we're making our turn here, I'm going to keep on turning this over so that way we intercept our flight plan. Now, remember, we don't have that ILS loaded yet into Hucky. So let's see what we need to do to make that happen. If we come over to our procedure button here, and the reason why I come over to your second PFD instead of your first one is because you just have a very small selection window here, and I think it's just force of habit. I come over here. You can use this one if you want, but this gives you a lot more information. So we want to select our approach. Select our approach, and you can see it says ILS 13 gives us the other options as well. So we're going to select that, but now you can see we get options. So vectors would be directly to that Dergy, which really doesn't give you much time to hit runway 13. Flint is that FNT, and then this is Sawyer, the one that the world map was trying to assign us. And then you can see Hucky is here at the initial approach fix. So that's what we want to select. If it sort of messes up like that, it's just a graphical glitch. Keep rotating down, and then we'll grab it. And just go ahead and hit enter. And since it's our next waypoint, we can go ahead and just hit activate. And yes. So now we can go and hit our nav button if we weren't already engaged in our nav mode, and it's going to make us turn and go directly to Hucky. Now we already climbed up to 4,000 and it's locked on. We're going a little too fast though, so I just want to back things off a little bit here. Get the engine purring a little nicer. There we go. So now that we have that loaded in the G1000, which you can see on our flight plan, now we have our origin, which is APTK, which is Oakland County, and then KOZW, which is Livingston County. You can see for our approach, we do have now ILS 13, and we're going to Hucky. Now there's this hold on there, which is that sort of teardrop that I was talking about. We let me see if I can bring that up to make that make a little bit more sense. There we go. So you can see this little teardrop. You can see this is a hold pattern here, but we're entering in that way to come around and come on down. Now these numbers next to the waypoints are known as constraints, and really it's saying, okay, at Hucky we should be at 3,000, and TOD stands for top of descent, which means if we start descending here, it will give us a little bit more information once we get to our top of descent of, it's going to take us about 11 minutes to get there, on what rate to go, and we'll have some guidance on here as well. The 172 has a more sophisticated autopilot with VNav, and I have a separate video which I'll put a link above on how to use VNav in order to capture these constraints for you so you don't have to manually select them. So the other thing we want to double check that we've got set is we do have the 108.55, which the G1000 picked up automatically because we did tune the ILS, but you just want to make sure that it did, because sometimes it might not have that information inside the G1000. You have to tune that manually, and you would do that here and then swap it into place using that button there. Now, in order to check your course, we'd have to swap over CDI. So this is your CDI. In purple will be GPS, like you can see here. If we click on the CDI button, a couple things are going to happen. You can see right now we're in nav mode. If I click on CDI, it just turns us into, it should have actually put us on roll mode, but it's just got us held in place as we are flying this heading. But you can see in green, we are now on nav 1. So you have your CDI, which is nav 1, nav 2, and then GPS is in purple. So on our nav 1, you want to make sure that that course is at 132, which we took note from the ILS chart, which it is. So we can go back now to GPS mode and click back on our nav. So now listen to the ATC. All right. So they are saying, hey, you should be using Sierra Victor Mike, which is that Salem transition, which made no sense. So we're going to say, hey, stand by.
Please stand by Sprocket 001.
And then we're going to let them know which approach we want to use. So we're going to say, yeah, we still want to use ILS runway 13, but we want to do it via the Hucky transition. And then we can request that from the controller.
001 would like ILS runway 13 approach Hucky transition.
And they're going to say, okay. There we go. We'll just acknowledge that. Well, actually, we're not going to acknowledge it. So if you get this instead of being handed off to a tower, basically they're saying, hey, you're going into an airport and you're close enough that you just need to tune their Unicom or traffic to let other aircraft in the area know where you're at. But you've gotten clearance from the controller in order to do your approach. They know where you're at, and now you're just going to tune the traffic so you can announce your position and when you're on final and all that type of stuff to let other aircraft in the area know where you are. We're not going to worry about that too much. We'll maybe announce that we're on final once we're coming in. Let's come back over. You can see we've got about 8 minutes until we're at Hucky. We've got about 6.5 minutes until we're at our top of descent. So I'm just going to let us keep on flying along here. We're cruising at really, you know, what I would call an extreme performance cruise, but that's fine. And we'll rejoin once we're getting close to the top of descent to show you how to descend down manually in order to be at the correct constraint at the correct point in time. Okay, so you can see here now that we're inside 1 minute to our sort of top of descent, it gives us our required and target to hit 3 degrees. So what we need to do is go ahead and say, okay, 3,000 feet. You can also see we have these new purple lines on here. So if we want to, we can go ahead and say, all right, let's go ahead and drop us down. This is telling us we need to be about 600 feet per minute, which should line up with about that purple mark there. And that means that we are going to get to Hucky right at about, 3,000 feet is where we should be able to hit Hucky. So as we come down, you can see that our estimated time is about 1 minute out. We're going down 600 feet per minute. We're going to get there a little early, but everything is actually working out really well. And all of this is just sort of an information and a guide for you in order to get down there and hit that waypoint. So we'll continue on down, and it's going to level off as normal at 3,000 feet. And then we're going to start this sort of teardrop to loop around and get on the localizer, which is the lateral part of the ILS. And then we're going to see a little G show up here, which is going to be for the vertical guidance or the glide path or glide slope. So that's what we'll wait until we actually, you can see, we're going to really kind of nail this. Coming up to 3,100, we got about 10 seconds to go. It's going to level this off before we kind of get there, but super close. I mean, within 40, 30 feet, our altitude was right on the money. So now you can see we're going to be doing this loop all the way around in order to join up to the localizer. So once we're about here, I'll rejoin with you to show you how we need to capture the ILS, which is essentially what this new line is going to be. Okay, so we're just finishing our little teardrop here, which didn't take us very long. And looking out, can I spot the runway? That might be it there. But what we can do now is, you can see that that's gone, and we're now sort of lined up on what is, there's not going to be any more turns, right? We're lined up for the runway. So if we hit our CDI button, you notice that it's green now. We're lined up on it. Remember, it turned off our nav mode though. So we can go ahead, we have our G showing up saying that, hey, yep, I know that there's a glide slope there, and we are tuned correctly, and we have our course set at 132. So we can go ahead and come down and hit our, actually we can hit nav mode right now if we want, and that'll keep us on the localizer, which remember is our lateral guidance. In order to actually capture the glide slope though, you need to be in approach mode. So that's the APR button. And now you can see it says approach. Approach will capture both the localizer, lateral, and the glide slope, which is vertical, and that'll take us down to the runway. You can see that we do have a little white GS up here. And you can see that right now we already have the localizer. We're on autopilot altitude mode at 3,000 feet. Once we capture the glide slope, it's going to jump over to here and say GS, because that's going to take control of our altitude, not our actual assignment. So at this point, we just need to fly along straight and wait for this to start coming down, which will happen. You can see this TOD, top of descent, because we're slightly above the constraint, which is 2,500. It's going to hit the glide path here and follow us down to the runway. If we were to go ahead and drop down to 2,500 feet now, the TOD would be right at Dirgy or Dirgy in order for us to come in, and same again, we'd capture the glide path there. So at this point, if you want to, like I said, this is an uncontrolled airfield, but we can go ahead and just say, yep, hey, we're on final.
Zulu Whiskey Traffic Sprocket 001 is on final runway 13 to land.
And in real life, that would just let anybody else know that is in this area, because they would be tuned to that Unicom station, know that, hey, we just are on final and coming in to land. Now we're going to pick up the glide slope here, and we're going really kind of fast because our nose is going to dip and we're going to pick up speed. So let's go ahead and start to back that off a little bit. Another thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come in and I'm going to bring my mixture back to full. We didn't talk about mixture, but that's for another video. Oh, there we go. We're slowing down now. And watch here, here, and here. Boom. That captured. Now our autopilot is saying, yep, okay, we need to start descending. It's dropping us below 3,000 feet. We're hitting some turbulence, is why it's jumping around a little bit. But we can already introduce our first notch of flaps here. If you notice, we have 140, 120, and 100 for our reference speeds on that. So we're doing pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and bring a little power back in. We're kind of far out, and we can go really all the way up to 140 if we wanted to. I would say that's still a little too fast. But now you can see that we are lined up. We're on the glide path. We're on the localizer. Same thing up here. And we're being guided down to the runway. I think the steps that most people miss is swapping over their CDI to be on your nav, making sure that this frequency is the one that we got from the ILS chart from SkyVector, and then making sure that you're in approach mode versus nav mode. If we were in nav mode, we would just fly right over this little green dot and it would continue below us. So those are the few steps that you need to take in order to actually get sort of locked on to an ILS. I'm just going to start to slow us down, get below 120, and introduce that second notch of flaps. There we go, 120. Now, one thing I recommend doing is, we're going to introduce the third notch of flaps here in just a moment, but we need to get underneath 100 knots. So I'm going to slow us down. I'm also going to come full forward on our... So there's someone else coming in. So yeah, there you go. There's someone else coming in, letting us know where they are at. We don't really have to worry about them because we are already close to touching down. We're going to introduce the final notch of flaps, but what I would recommend doing is keeping your speed up when you're coming in on a glide slope. The reason being is that certain things like turbulence, you see now we're way above it, and we're going to now have to increase our descent rate. The autopilot's doing all of this. So you need to hand on throttle and really kind of adjust that speed to where you feel comfortable, because now we are going to sort of catch back up and we're lined up. That's going to decrease our speed because we're not descending quite as fast. Same again, there goes the nose down a little bit more. There's going to be a little bit of wind, a little bit of turbulence, that type of stuff. Now once you're close, like, here, we can go ahead and just disengage the autopilot. And we're going to fly the rest in manually. that is how you capture an ILS off of a GPS flight plan. Try to make that as basic as possible, but even on a more complex flight plan, the same principles apply as far as making sure that you're tuned, course is right, and that you do the correct swapping over on your CDI and the approach button there, and then you'll follow it right on in. So thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe. If you have any questions, please make a comment down below. Until next time, take care.